The precision of doubt. The soft hiss of steam filled the passenger compartment as the Swiss Federal Railway carriage rocked gently along the Alpine Valley floor. Georg Luger pressed his forehead against the cold window glass, watching snow-dusted pine forests blur past in the grey light of March 1900. In his leather satchel lay the weight of 3 years' obsession, a pistol that had already endured one humiliating failure in these same mountains, now rebuilt with microscopic precision that most men would never appreciate. The conductor's voice echoed through the car. "Next stop, Thun, military testing facility." Georg's stomach tightened, 8 misfires in 20 shots during the previous trials. The Swiss officers had watched his toggle-action mechanism seize in alpine cold, with the patient disappointment of men who preferred reliable brutality to mechanical poetry. His father's voice seemed to whisper from the grave, "Another Austrian dreamer, Georg. Dreams don't pay debts." But this time felt different. 3 sleepless months with Heinrich Zimmermann, a watchmaker whose chronometers survived Siberian expeditions and tropical hellscapes. Different alloys, refined springs, tolerances measured to the 1,000th of an inch. The weapon in his satchel was no longer just precise, it was reliable. The train lurched to a halt at a small wooden platform. Georg stepped onto packed snow, his breath forming small clouds in the sharp mountain air. A Swiss officer in immaculate grey uniform waited beside a military carriage, his face betraying nothing. "Herr Luger, I am Captain Müller. The committee is ready for your demonstration." Georg nodded, gripping his satchel tighter. Through the carriage window he glimpsed the testing range, a collection of military buildings nestled against pine-covered slopes, Swiss flags snapping in the mountain wind. This was where the future would be decided. The testing facility's main hall smelled of gun oil and cold metal. 5 Swiss officers sat behind a polished oak table, their faces reflecting the careful neutrality of a nation that prized precision over passion. Georg placed his redesigned pistol on the green felt surface, the distinctive toggle action catching overhead light like a mechanical question mark. "Gentlemen, the Luger Parabellum. I have addressed the cold weather reliability issues from our previous trials." Colonel Weber, the committee chairman, examined the weapon with surgical attention. His fingers traced the toggle mechanism, testing its movement. "The basic design remains unchanged. The principles are identical. However, the metallurgy and spring tensions have been completely re-engineered for extreme conditions." Georg's voice carried steady confidence, but his hands trembled slightly as he demonstrated the loading mechanism. 7 rounds in the magazine. Toggle action that cycled with mathematical elegance, everything his years of rejection and midnight calculations had taught him about the intersection of mechanical precision and battlefield reality. "Very well, Herr Luger. The outdoor range awaits." What happened in the next 47 minutes would quietly change military history forever. Georg stood at the firing line as Captain Müller loaded the pistol with standard 7.65-meter cartridges. The mountain air was bitter, well below freezing, exactly the conditions that had doomed his previous demonstration. The first shot rang out clear and sharp across the valley. The toggle action snapped back and forward with mechanical poetry. A second shot, a third. Georg watched the Swiss officers' faces, searching for any sign of the dismissive skepticism he'd endured from Prussian colonels in Berlin. 50 rounds, 100, 200. The Luger fired without hesitation, each cartridge cycling through the chamber with the predictable logic Georg had dreamed of since childhood. By the 300th round, Colonel Weber was no longer pretending indifference. "Remarkable consistency, Herr Luger. The cold appears to have no adverse effect." "None whatsoever, sir. The weapon functions reliably in temperatures from -30 to +50 degrees Celsius." When the test concluded at 500 rounds without malfunction, the silence stretched across the firing range like held breath. Georg stood watching these careful Swiss officers calculate what they had witnessed. Not just a weapon, but a symbol of engineering precision that would outlive the empires currently preparing for unprecedented industrial slaughter. Colonel Weber set the pistol on the range table with ceremonial care. The Swiss Federal Council will receive our recommendation for immediate adoption. Georg felt his knees weaken slightly. 3 years of humiliation and rejection, dissolved in the span of one alpine afternoon. But as he packed his demonstration materials, a strange unease settled in his chest. He had created something that would carry Swiss precision into whatever darkness Europe was stumbling toward. The train back to Berlin carried Georg through a landscape that seemed subtly different. Snow-covered villages, factory smokestacks, the growing industrial apparatus of a continent arming for conflicts that would dwarf anything in human history. His pistol would be part of that machinery now. In his compartment, Georg turned the successful prototype over in his hands, feeling the weight of every adjustment, every midnight calculation. This weapon would outlive empires. It would appear in battles he couldn't imagine, carried by men whose causes he might never support. But tonight, riding through the Swiss countryside toward an uncertain future, Georg Luger allowed himself the engineer's satisfaction of precision achieved. The toggle action moved with mathematical beauty. The mechanism that had been dismissed as a jeweler's showcase had proven itself in conditions that broke lesser weapons. Outside his window, Europe slept under snow that would soon be churned into mud by armies carrying weapons born from rejection and relentless calculation. If stories like this make you question what you'd do in someone else's boots, tell us in the comments how you imagine you'd react in this camp, and stay with us for the next chapters. What price does precision exact on the man who achieves it? Berlin in April 1904 hummed with the mechanical confidence of an empire discovering its technological destiny. Georg walked through the Ludwig Löwe and Company workshops, past rows of precision lathes and assembly benches where his parabellum pistols emerged like steel prayers answered. The distinctive toggle-action mechanism that had once been dismissed as unseemly curiosity was now the pride of German engineering. Heinrich Schneider, the senior production manager, approached with a telegram. From Admiral von Tirpitz's office, Herr Luger, the German Navy formally adopts the Luger P08 as standard sidearm for all naval officers. Georg accepted the telegram with hands that no longer trembled with uncertainty. 4 years since the Swiss trials, and his weapon had become something beyond mechanical achievement. It was becoming a symbol. The distinctive silhouette appeared in recruitment posters, carried by officers who saw it as proof of their nation's technological superiority. But symbols carry weight beyond their creators' intentions. In the company's testing room, Georg examined the latest production models with the methodical attention that had driven him since childhood. Each pistol bore the precision his father's railway accident had taught him to value, the predictable logic of systems that worked when human judgment failed. The army evaluation begins next month, Schneider informed him. General von Falkenhayn himself will observe the trials. Georg nodded, though unease settled in his stomach like cold coffee. The weapon designed for Swiss precision was becoming the emblem of German militarism. In Vienna's Café Central, where he occasionally met other Austrian expatriates, conversations had grown tense. Europe was dividing into armed camps, and his pistol was becoming part of that machinery. That evening, Georg sat in his Berlin apartment, drafting a letter to his sister Maria in Vienna. The words came slowly, weighted with implications he couldn't name. Dearest Maria, the Luger has achieved success beyond our father's wildest dreams of respectability. The German military speaks of technological dominance and engineering superiority. I created a tool for precision shooting. They have made it a symbol of something larger. I am not certain I understand what I have helped create. Georg set down his pen, staring at the unfinished letter. Through his window, Berlin's electric streetlights illuminated a city growing drunk on industrial power. Factories worked through the night, producing weapons for conflicts that generals discussed in abstract terms of national honor and technological advantage. The next morning brought visitors to the Ludwig Loewe facility, a delegation of Prussian officers led by General von Falkenhayn, whose reputation for thoroughness preceded him like cold wind. Georg stood beside his production line, watching these military men examine his pistols, with the calculating attention of buyers selecting tools for work he preferred not to imagine. "Exceptional reliability, Herr Luger," the general observed, field stripping a pistol with practiced efficiency. The toggle action provides superior leverage for rapid firing sequences. "Yes, sir." The mathematical distribution of recoil forces allows for faster target reacquisition than traditional revolver mechanisms. Georg spoke the technical language fluently, but something in the general's tone suggested uses beyond target practice. The officers discussed suppression fire and close-quarters engagement with clinical detachment that made Georg's engineering precision feel suddenly naive. General von Falkenhayn hefted the pistol, testing its balance. "The German army requires weapons that function reliably in all conditions: mud, rain, extreme cold. Colonial conflicts have taught us that European theaters may demand rapid firepower in difficult terrain. The Parabellum exceeds those requirements, sir. Indeed, we also appreciate weapons that project authority. A sidearm carried by German officers should reflect our technological advancement." Georg nodded, though the word authority carried implications that felt heavier than mechanical precision. His toggle action design wasn't just functional, it was distinctively recognizable, a visual symbol that would be instantly identified with German military culture. After the officers departed, Georg remained in the workshop, mechanically inspecting production models. Each pistol was perfect within thousandths of an inch, embodying the mathematical certainty he had sought since his father's death. But mechanical perfection was becoming something larger and more troubling. Schneider approached with production reports. "Orders are exceeding our capacity, Herr Luger. The Army wants 3,000 units for the initial deployment. Navy requirements continue growing. Export inquiries are arriving from German allies." Export inquiries. Turkey, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria. German military advisors are recommending our pistol to allied armies. Georg felt the workshop walls pressing closer. His weapon was spreading across Europe like a mechanical contagion, carried by officers who would face each other across battlefields, in conflicts already being planned by men who confused technological superiority with moral righteousness. That night, Georg finished his letter to Maria with growing urgency. "I fear I have created something that will outlive its creator's intentions. The precision I sought has become a symbol of power I never intended to represent. If war comes, and the generals speak of it as inevitable, my pistol will be carried by men who see enemies, where I see only other engineers with different uniforms. Give my love to Vienna, where boys still play with wooden toys instead of studying the mathematics of mechanical advantage." Oh, he sealed the letter with wax that felt like a decision he couldn't unmake. Outside his window, Berlin's factories continued their nocturnal production, feeding the industrial appetite of an empire, preparing for conflicts that would transform his precise mechanical poetry into something far more lasting and troubling than simple engineering achievement. In the distance, church bells chimed midnight over a continent, arming itself with tools born from rejection, calculation, and the relentless pursuit of precision that had no conscience beyond mathematical certainty. How does a man reconcile the purity of engineering with the darkness of its applications? The telegram arrived on a grey Vienna morning in August 1914, its words stark against the yellow paper. Austro-Hungarian mobilization declared. Report regional military authority immediately. Emperor commands. Georg set the message beside his coffee cup in the Café Landmann, watching Vienna transform around him as the old world died in the space of a heartbeat. 16 years had passed since that cramped workshop above the clockmaker's shop. The Luger P08 now rode in holsters across Europe, carried by German officers who saw it as proof of their nation's destiny, while Austrian infantry faced French soldiers whose own sidearms seemed clumsy by comparison. Georg's precision engineering had become the standard against which all military pistols were measured, but precision, he was discovering, meant nothing in the face of industrial slaughter. Franz Hartmann, an old friend from the Technische Hochschule, slumped into the adjacent chair with the exhausted posture of a man who had spent 3 days processing mobilization orders. "They're calling it the war to end all wars, Georg. As if any war has ever ended anything except young men's lives." Georg folded the telegram carefully, precise creases reflecting habitual attention to detail. "How many men will carry weapons I designed into this madness? Every German officer, most Austrian units, Bulgarian allies, Turkish advisors. Your pistol has become the sidearm of the Central Powers, my friend." The weight of that fact settled in Georg's chest like ice water. Across the cafe, young men in new uniforms said goodbye to sweethearts who tried not to cry. These boys would carry his mathematical precision into battles that generals described with abstract terms like decisive engagement and strategic advantage. Franz leaned forward, his voice dropping. "They're saying the British have new rifles that can fire 15 rounds per minute. The French have artillery that can destroy entire companies from 10 kilometers. This won't be like the colonial skirmishes, Georg. This will be industrial murder." Georg stared into his coffee, seeing reflections that reminded him of gun oil and toggle mechanisms. "I created a tool for precision. They've made it into a symbol of technological supremacy. Symbols matter in war. A German officer drawing your pistol sends a message about engineering superiority, about the inevitable victory of better tools over inferior enemies." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the cafe entrance. A group of university students were singing patriotic songs, their voices bright with enthusiasm for adventures they couldn't imagine. Georg watched their faces, young, eager, convinced of their righteousness, and saw future ghosts. That afternoon, Georg visited the Vienna Technical Museum, seeking solace in mechanical displays that represented pure engineering achievement divorced from human consequence. But even here, among steam engines and precision instruments, the implications of his work followed him like shadows. In the firearms exhibit, a pristine Luger P08 sat in a glass case labeled "Pinnacle of German Engineering Excellence." Visitors admired its sleek lines and innovative toggle action, while museum guides explained its revolutionary contribution to military efficiency. No one mentioned the nights Georg had spent calculating spring tensions, while his father's debts accumulated like accusatory whispers. An elderly gentleman with a professor's bearing approached the display case. "Remarkable weapon, this Luger. Perfect synthesis of form and function. The inventor must be enormously proud of such achievement." Georg found himself unable to respond. Pride seemed an inadequate word for the complex emotions churning in his chest as Europe prepared to test his precision against human flesh. The evening newspapers brought reports from the mobilization centers. Trains carrying soldiers toward frontiers where empires would collide with unprecedented violence. German units equipped with Luger pistols marched singing toward Belgium. Austrian officers practiced quick-draw techniques with weapons that embodied their engineers' obsession with mathematical perfection. Georg returned to his small apartment and retrieved a wooden box from his closet. The original prototype that had failed so catastrophically during the first Swiss trials. The mechanism that had seemed sluggish in alpine cold was now refined into weapons that functioned reliably at 50 degrees below zero. He field-stripped the prototype with ritual care, examining each component that had led to global adoption. The trigger mechanism that distributed forces with mathematical elegance. The toggle action that cycled with mechanical poetry. The magazine that fed ammunition with the predictable reliability he had craved since childhood. But reliability in whose service? Precision toward what end? Georg opened his writing desk and began a letter he had postponed for 16 years. To whom it may concern. I am Georg Johann Luger, inventor of the pistol that bears my name. As Europe enters what may be the most devastating conflict in human history, I feel compelled to document the intentions behind my creation versus the purposes it now serves. I sought to design a reliable sidearm for professional soldiers, a tool that would function with mathematical certainty when human judgment failed under stress. I never intended to create a symbol of national technological superiority or an instrument of ideological dominance. If this war unfolds as military experts predict, my pistol will be present at battles that dwarf anything previously conceived. It will be carried by men who see enemies, where I see only other engineers wearing different uniforms. The precision I achieve through calculation and obsessive refinement will be employed in service of causes I cannot evaluate and consequences I cannot predict. Georg paused, pen suspended over paper. Outside his window, Vienna's streetlights illuminated a city already adapting to wartime reality. Tomorrow, young men would board trains that would carry them toward frontiers, where his mathematical precision would encounter human chaos on an unprecedented scale. The letter remained unfinished as church bells chimed midnight over an empire whose officers carried weapons born from rejection, humiliation, and the relentless pursuit of engineering excellence that recognized no moral authority beyond mechanical reliability. Do you think you'd cling to what you were taught back home, or to what your own eyes see in a place like this? Comment which side you'd lean toward, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. Can any inventor truly control what his creation becomes once released into history's machinery? November 1916 brought reports that made Vienna's newspapers difficult to read. The Battle of the Somme had consumed entire divisions in fighting that reduced human beings to casualty statistics. British, French, and German forces faced each other across killing fields where individual weapons, even precision-engineered ones, seemed insignificant against industrial-scale slaughter. Georg sat in his study, surrounded by technical journals and military reports that arrived with bureaucratic regularity. The Luger P08 had performed flawlessly in trench conditions that destroyed most other sidearms. Mud, rain, extreme cold, the environmental challenges he had solved through metallurgy and spring tension calculations proved irrelevant compared to the sheer scale of mechanical destruction. A knock at his door interrupted his reading. Heinrich Zimmermann, the Swiss watchmaker whose expertise had solved Georg's cold-weather reliability problems, stood in the hallway holding a leather portfolio. "Georg, I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. I was passing through Vienna on business, and I wanted to show you something." Heinrich entered, his usual precise demeanor shadowed by obvious unease. He opened the portfolio to reveal photographs and documents with official Swiss military seals. "These are field reports from our officers who carry your pistol. I thought you should know how your design has performed under actual combat conditions." Georg examined the photographs with growing comprehension. Swiss border guards posed with well-maintained Luger pistols, their weapons showing the mechanical wear of regular use, but no fundamental deterioration. Technical reports described flawless function in alpine conditions that would disable lesser weapons. "Your engineering saved lives, Georg. Swiss neutrality required weapons that functioned reliably during border incidents with German and French patrols. The Luger's reliability prevented several confrontations from escalating." Georg set the documents aside carefully. "And the German reports? The Austrian evaluations?" Heinrich's expression darkened. "Those tell different stories. Your pistol has become more than a weapon, my friend. It represents technological superiority in ways you never intended." The Swiss watchmaker produced additional documents. intelligence reports acquired through neutral diplomatic channels. German officers were issued Luger pistols as symbols of elite status, carried into battles where their psychological impact often exceeded their tactical utility. They call it the victory weapon, Heinrich continued. German propaganda presents the Luger as proof of their engineering dominance over inferior Allied equipment. Your toggle action has become a visual symbol recognizable to soldiers on both sides of no man's land. Georg studied photographs of captured weapons displayed in Allied intelligence briefings. British and French soldiers had learned to identify the distinctive toggle silhouette from considerable distances, treating its appearance as confirmation of facing elite German units. I designed a reliable sidearm for professional soldiers, Georg said quietly. They've transformed it into a symbol of cultural supremacy. Heinrich nodded grimly. Symbols matter in war, especially wars where technological advancement becomes confused with moral righteousness. Your precise engineering has been conscripted into service of ideologies you never supported. The conversation was interrupted by Georg's housekeeper, who brought tea and apologetic news of another visitor, Dr. Friedrich Müller, a physician recently returned from the Eastern Front Medical Corps. Doctor. Müller entered with the careful posture of a man who had witnessed trauma beyond civilian comprehension. His medical bag bore stains that spoke of battlefield surgery performed under conditions that challenged human endurance. Herr Luger, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. I wanted to meet the inventor whose weapon has become so prominent in this conflict. Georg gestured toward available seating, though something in the doctor's tone suggested this wasn't a social call. I've treated wounds inflicted by many different weapons during my service with the Medical Corps, Dr. Müller continued. Your pistol is remarkably effective, from a medical perspective. Clean entry wounds, predictable ballistics. Much easier to treat than injuries from rifle rounds or shrapnel. The clinical assessment felt both reassuring and disturbing. Georg had designed his weapon for precision, not specifically for wounding characteristics, but the doctor's observation highlighted consequences he had never calculated. However, Müller continued, I wanted to discuss something more troubling. Your pistol has acquired symbolic significance that extends beyond tactical utility. The physician opened his medical bag and withdrew a captured German officer's holster, its leather bearing the distinctive outline left by years of carrying a Luger P08. This belonged to an Oberleutnant captured near Tannenberg. He spoke extensively during medical treatment about the honor of carrying German engineering superiority into battle. Your weapon has become a talisman of technological destiny. Georg examined the holster with growing unease. The leather showed signs of meticulous care, suggesting the officer had maintained his weapon with almost religious devotion. They believe their tools make them superior men, Müller observed. Your engineering precision has been conscripted into service of racial theories and cultural supremacy doctrines that would horrify any rational engineer. Heinrich and Dr. Müller exchanged glances weighted with shared knowledge of developments Georg was only beginning to understand. There's something else, Heinrich said quietly. Intelligence reports suggest German military leadership is planning unprecedented applications of technological warfare. Chemical weapons, mechanized assault, strategic bombing of civilian targets. Your pistol represents their faith in technological solutions to political problems. Georg felt the study walls closing around him like a mechanical trap. His mathematical precision had become part of machinery that exceeded his comprehension or control. What would you have me do? Stop production? Retract patents? My weapon exists now, regardless of my intentions. Dr. Müller leaned forward with the intensity of a man delivering medical diagnosis. Document your true intentions, Georg. History will need testimony from inventors who created tools that were transformed into symbols. The precision you achieved through calculation, must be distinguished from the purposes others have assigned to your achievement. As his visitors departed into Vienna's evening darkness, Georg remained at his desk, staring at the holster that had contained his precision engineering in service of causes he couldn't evaluate. Outside his window, streetlights illuminated a city adapting to wartime rationing, while empires consumed their young men in battles where individual weapons seemed insignificant against mechanical destruction. The letter he had begun 2 years earlier remained unfinished, its implications growing more urgent with each report from battlefields where his mathematical poetry had become part of industrial slaughter. If you created something that outlived your intentions, how would you reclaim its meaning? Georg's hands shook as he opened the package that had arrived through Swiss diplomatic channels in December 1918. The war was over, but its consequences were still being calculated across a devastated continent. Inside the carefully wrapped container lay something that would haunt him for the remainder of his days: a Luger P08, with a story that crystallized everything his precision engineering had become. The accompanying letter bore the letterhead of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Herr Luger, we believed you should see this weapon and understand its history. This pistol was carried by Hauptmann Klaus Weber, killed during the final offensive near Compiègne. Before his death, Captain Weber requested that his sidearm be returned to its inventor with this testimony of its service. Georg lifted the pistol with ritual care. The toggle mechanism showed signs of extensive use, but remained mechanically perfect, cycling with the mathematical precision he had engineered 2 decades earlier. But the weapon bore other markings: scratches on the grip plates that formed crude letters spelling Bertha. Inside the package lay Captain Weber's personal journal, its leather cover stained with mud and substances Georg preferred not to identify. The final entries, written in pencil during the war's closing weeks, documented the relationship between a soldier and his sidearm. November 1918. The Luger has never failed me. 4 years of trench warfare, gas attacks, hand-to-hand combat in shell craters. This weapon functions with reliability that seems supernatural. I named it after my sister Bertha, killed during the British bombing of Freiburg. This pistol carries her memory into every engagement. Georg read with growing comprehension of how his mathematical precision had acquired emotional significance he had never intended. Captain Weber's journal described the Luger not as a tool, but as a companion, a tangible symbol of technological superiority that provided psychological comfort during mechanized horror. October 1918. Young recruits ask about the Luger. I tell them it represents German engineering excellence, proof that our tools are superior even when our cause grows uncertain. The toggle action cycles with mechanical poetry that reminds me civilization still exists beyond this industrial nightmare. But the journal's most devastating entry was dated just days before Captain Weber's death. November 10th, 1918. Captured a French officer today. His sidearm was a clumsy revolver that jammed in the mud. When he saw my Luger, he said something in broken German. Beautiful weapon. Who made this? I told him about German engineering superiority. He smiled sadly and said, the man who made this, he has family, children. I couldn't answer. For the first time, I wondered about the inventor who created this precise tool. Did he intend for it to become a symbol of ideological supremacy? Or did he simply want to build something that worked reliably when human judgment failed? Georg set the journal aside with hands that trembled from more than age. Captain Weber's final question pierced through 2 decades of rationalization and professional pride to reach the core of his dilemma. How could engineering precision be separated from the purposes others assigned to it? The package contained one final document, a letter written in Captain Weber's hand but never sent. Dear Herr Luger, if you still live, I carry your weapon into battles that exceed human comprehension. Your engineering precision has become my talisman against industrial chaos. But I fear we have conscripted your mathematical achievement into service of causes you never supported. If I survive this war, I want to meet you and discuss the distance between an inventor's intentions and his creation's destiny. Your toggle action cycles with mechanical poetry, but poetry can be recited in service of any cause, noble or terrible. Georg walked to his window, holding Captain Weber's final letter against the light of a Vienna afternoon. Below, the city was slowly recovering from the war's devastation, but the philosophical questions raised by Weber's testimony demanded answers that mechanical engineering couldn't provide. He returned to his desk and opened the letter he had been writing intermittently for 4 years. To whom it may concern, I am Georg Johann Luger, inventor of the pistol that bears my name. The war that has just concluded demonstrated the distance between engineering intentions and historical consequences. My weapon was carried by men who confused technological precision with moral superiority, who transformed mathematical reliability into symbols of cultural dominance. Captain Klaus Weber died carrying my pistol, which he named after his sister killed in Allied bombing. His journal reveals how my precision engineering became his emotional anchor during mechanized horror I never imagined. He asked questions that haunt me. Did I create a tool or a symbol? Can engineering achievement be separated from the ideologies that conscript it? I designed the Luger for reliability under stress, mathematical precision that would function when human judgment failed. But human judgment failed in ways I never calculated. My toggle action became recognizable to soldiers on both sides of no man's land, a visual symbol of German technological superiority that outlived the empire it represented. Georg paused, staring at Captain Weber's pistol. The mechanical perfection remained unchanged, but its meaning had been transformed by contexts he couldn't control or predict. If future inventors read this testimony, understand that precision engineering carries moral weight beyond mathematical calculation. Tools become symbols. Symbols acquire emotional significance, and emotional significance can be conscripted into service of causes that exceed their creator's comprehension or approval. I sought respect through innovation and discovered that genius, once released into history, follows trajectories that humble its creator. Captain Weber's question remains: what responsibility does precision carry for the purposes others assign to it? Outside his window, Vienna's church bells chimed evening prayers over a continent learning to count its dead in numbers that reduced individual weapons to statistical insignificance. But Captain Weber's journal testified to the enduring power of engineering precision to provide psychological comfort during civilizational collapse. Georg sealed his completed letter with wax that felt like a burden finally shared. Captain Weber's Luger would remain on his desk, not as a trophy of engineering achievement, but as a reminder that mathematical precision carries consequences that extend far beyond its inventor's intentions or control. The toggle action still cycled with mechanical poetry, but now Georg understood that poetry could serve any master willing to conscript its beauty. How do we measure the weight of unintended consequences against the purity of original intentions? Georg Luger died in 1923, 5 years after armistice brought an uncertain peace to a continent still calculating the cost of mechanical warfare. But the questions raised by Captain Weber's testimony lived on, carried by men who had witnessed the transformation of precision engineering into symbols that outlived their creator's intentions. Dr. Friedrich Müller, the physician who had treated battlefield wounds inflicted by Luger pistols, established a small practice in Vienna where former soldiers sought treatment for injuries that went beyond physical trauma. In his office, surrounded by medical texts and surgical instruments, he kept Captain Weber's journal as a reminder of how technological precision could acquire emotional significance during civilizational collapse. One grey afternoon in November 1925, Dr. Miller received an unexpected visitor, Thomas Brennan, an American journalist researching the war's technological legacy for a book about weapons that had shaped modern conflict. Dr. Muller, I understand you knew Georg Luger personally. I'm trying to understand how his invention became more than just a sidearm. Miller gestured toward a chair beside his desk, where Captain Weber's journal lay open to its final entry. Herr Brennan, Georg Luger created a tool for precision shooting. History transformed it into something he never intended, a symbol of technological supremacy that outlived the empire it represented. Brennan examined the journal with the careful attention of a writer who understood that individual testimonies could illuminate larger historical truths. This Captain Weber, he seemed to understand the contradiction between engineering achievement and ideological symbolism. Weber was unusual among German officers, Muller replied. Most saw the Luger as confirmation of their cultural superiority. Weber began questioning whether technological precision implied moral righteousness. Müller opened his desk drawer and withdrew a small collection of items gathered during his medical service: captured weapons, personal letters, photographs of young men who would never return home. I treated soldiers from both sides, Herr Brennan. British boys carried revolvers that jammed in mud. French officers used sidearms that required both hands to reload quickly. But they also carried memories of homes they wanted to protect, letters from families they hoped to see again. The physician held up a photograph of German and Allied medical personnel working together in a field hospital during a temporary ceasefire. In that moment, technological superiority meant nothing. The Luger's precision couldn't distinguish between worthy and unworthy patients. Engineering excellence proved irrelevant to the human decency that made medical treatment possible. Brennan scribbled notes while studying the photograph, recognizing a story that transcended simple narratives of victory and defeat. What happened to Luger after the war? Did he ever address the questions raised by Captain Weber? Müller smiled sadly. Georg completed a letter documenting his intentions versus his creation's destiny, but he never published it. Some truths are too complex for public consumption, especially when national pride depends on technological mythology. Do you have that letter? It was destroyed with Georg's personal papers, but I remember its central question: what responsibility does precision carry for the purposes others assign to it? Brennan set down his pen, recognizing the philosophical weight of that question. And your answer, Doctor? I learned that engineering achievement cannot be separated from human context. Georg designed a reliable tool, but tools become symbols. Symbols acquire emotional significance, and emotional significance can be conscripted into service of any cause willing to claim it. Müller walked to his office window, where Vienna's afternoon light illuminated a city rebuilding from warfare that had exceeded all predictions of mechanical destruction. Georg died believing his mathematical precision had been conscripted into service of ideologies he never supported. But Captain Weber's journal suggests a different interpretation, that precision engineering provided psychological comfort during mechanical horror, regardless of the causes that justified it. Brennan reviewed his notes, searching for a conclusion that honored both engineering achievement and historical complexity. So the Luger became simultaneously a tool and a talisman. Exactly. Mathematical reliability that functioned when human judgment failed, but also a symbol that soldiers could invest with personal meaning during civilizational collapse. As Brennan prepared to leave, Muller offered him a final observation that would shape the journalist's eventual book. Herr Brennan, Georg Luger, sought respect through innovation and discovered that genius, once released into history, follows trajectories beyond its creator's comprehension. But perhaps that's the nature of true achievement. It serves human needs that exceed its inventor's imagination. Brennan's book, published in 1927, concluded with Captain Weber's question about the distance between engineering intentions and historical consequences. But the book's final paragraph offered a perspective that honored both Georg's mathematical precision and the soldiers who had carried his creation through mechanical nightmare. The Luger P08 represents the eternal tension between tool and symbol, precision and purpose, engineering achievement and ideological conscription. Georg Luger designed a weapon that would function reliably when human judgment failed under stress. History transformed his mathematical poetry into a symbol that outlived the empire it served and the man who dreamed it into existence. Perhaps this is the burden of all significant innovation, to discover that precision, once achieved, belongs not to its creator but to the human needs it serves, regardless of the causes that claim it. Years later, when collectors and historians examined surviving Luger pistols, they found mechanisms that still cycled with the mathematical precision Georg had engineered in that Vienna workshop. The toggle action moved with mechanical poetry that testified to engineering excellence, achieved through rejection, humiliation, and relentless calculation. But the weapons bore other markings as well, scratches and wear patterns that told stories of soldiers who had named their sidearms after deceased loved ones, carried them as talismans against industrial chaos, invested them with emotional significance that transcended tactical utility. The precision remained unchanged, but its meaning had been transformed by contexts Georg never anticipated. His toggle action design had become both tool and symbol, mathematical achievement and emotional anchor, engineering precision conscripted into service of causes that exceeded their inventor's imagination or control. In the end, history remembered the weapon more vividly than its creator, not because Georg Luger was insignificant, but because true innovation serves human needs that outlive its inventor's intentions, following trajectories through darkness and light that humble the genius who achieved precision without predicting its purpose. If this story reminded you that even in the darkest times, small acts of humanity still matter, subscribe to the channel. Tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. The click of metal against metal had grown silent, but the questions it raised about precision and purpose would echo through every subsequent innovation that changed the world.